When she reached the stop, she stood with her hands folded in front of her. A few people stood there as well. Some were busy on their phones. Others looked tired, maybe heading to work. They glanced at her but did not say anything. She did not mind. She had always been comfortable staying quiet. The bus arrived with a low hum, and she stepped on carefully. She chose a seat near the middle and sat with her back straight. Her thoughts drifted toward what she needed to do later. She rehearsed the words in her mind. Not angry words. Not loud words. Just the truth. As the bus moved, she remembered the moment the young man at the dealership had mocked her. She remembered how the other workers had laughed. She remembered how small they tried to make her feel. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting out a soft breath. She did not want revenge. She simply wanted to show them that their assumptions had been wrong. The bus ride took about half an hour. When she stepped off, she felt her heart beat a little faster. She looked up at the dealership sign. The building looked the same. Bright windows. Cars lined up outside. Employees walking around with clipboards. She paused for a moment, gathering herself. She walked toward the main glass doors and pushed them open gently. The smell inside was the same polish, tires, and fresh air from the vents. Some customers were sitting in chairs, waiting. A few staff members stood near the front desk. One of the same employees from the day before noticed her. His smile faded slightly, replaced by confusion. He whispered something to another worker, and both looked her way. She did not let their reaction bother her. She walked straight toward the reception desk. The young woman behind the counter lifted her head, her eyes widening when she recognized her. "You're back," the young woman said. She tried to sound polite, but the surprise in her voice was impossible to hide. The older woman nodded lightly. "Yes, dear. I came because I have something important to talk about." The young woman forced a small smile. Of course. Do you need help with anything?" Before she could answer, the same young man who had mocked her stepped toward them. He gave a soft laugh, as if he still found her presence amusing. "You're here again? Look, ma'am, we already told you the cars you were asking about are probably out of your range. Maybe you want to look at something older? Something cheaper?" His tone stayed light, but the disrespect in it was clear. Several other employees glanced over, listening. A few customers turned their heads. The older woman felt something inside her go still. She looked at the young man calmly, her face soft but firm. "I want to speak with the manager," she said. The young man frowned, crossing his arms. "The manager is busy. Maybe you can tell me what you need instead." She shook her head gently. "No, dear. This is something only the manager should hear." Her calm tone unsettled him. He hesitated, then rolled his eyes and walked toward the back office. A moment later, he returned with the manager, a man in his late 40s wearing a neat shirt and an expression of curiosity. "Good morning, ma'am," the manager said kindly. "How can I help you today?" The older woman gave him a respectful nod. "Thank you for seeing me. I came because I want to clear something that happened yesterday. But before I explain, may we talk privately?" The manager's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Of course. Please follow me." The young man, the same one who had spoken badly to her, smirked and whispered something to another employee. She noticed, but she did not react. The manager led her into a small office with glass walls. The blinds were partially open, allowing some privacy, but still letting others see in. She sat down slowly, placing her purse on her lap. The manager sat across from her. "All right," he said gently. "What's on your mind?" She looked at the window for a moment before speaking. "Yesterday, when I came here, some of your staff spoke to me in a poor manner. They looked at me as if I did not belong, as if I had no worth." The manager's expression shifted. He leaned forward a little. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Could you please tell me who treated you this way?" She nodded. "I can. But more importantly, I want to share something with you before we discuss that." She slowly opened her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She placed it on the table. The manager looked at it, unsure. "These papers," she said softly, "explain who I am and why I came here yesterday." The manager carefully opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the documents. It took only a few seconds for his expression to shift from polite interest to surprise, then to disbelief. He looked up at her. "Is this real?" She nodded. "Yes, dear. Every word." The manager leaned back in his chair, trying to gather his thoughts. He glanced at the papers again. She watched his face as he processed everything. His expression became more serious, more respectful. "I had no idea," he said. "If what I'm reading is true, then the staff should have treated you with the utmost respect. I'm deeply sorry for how you were spoken to." She gave him a kind look. "It is all right. I only wish that people would not judge others by how they look. Age, color, clothes, none of these show a person's true worth." The manager nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right." He stood up halfway, then sat back again, unsure of the right way to proceed. "Ma'am, would you mind if we discuss this with the staff? I believe they need to understand the seriousness of what happened." She thought for a moment. "Yes, but not with anger. I don't want anyone punished. I only want them to learn." The manager felt relief wash over him. "Of course, thank you for your kindness." He stood and opened the office door. He called a few employees over, including the young man who had mocked her. They entered the office slowly, unsure of what was happening. The young man gave her a quick, uncomfortable glance. "Is something wrong?" The manager held up the papers. "Yes, something is very wrong, and you all need to hear this." The older woman stayed quiet, her hands folded calmly in her lap. The manager began explaining who she truly was. The room went still. The expressions on the employees' faces changed one by one: confusion, then shock, then embarrassment. The young man's face turned pale. He swallowed hard, looking at her with a different expression than he had the day before. No more smirking. No more jokes. She watched them quietly. She was not here to shame anyone. She only wanted to show them that kindness mattered. When the manager finished speaking, he stepped aside, giving her space. She looked at the group gently. "I did not come here to teach you a lesson. Life will do that on its own. I only want you to remember that every person who walks through those doors deserves respect. You do not know their story. You do not know their struggles. And you do not know their worth." The room stayed quiet. Some employees looked down at the floor. The young man finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "Ma'am, I'm really sorry. I didn't know." She nodded kindly. "I know, dear, but now you do." Her calmness made the apology feel real. The manager cleared his throat. "Ma'am, would you allow us to make this right? Anything we can do, please tell us." She smiled warmly. "Just treat others better. That is all I ask." The employees nodded. The meeting ended, and the manager walked her out with genuine gratitude. As she stepped outside, the wind brushed gently against her face. She felt lighter than she had in days. She looked back once more at the dealership. She knew change would not happen overnight, but something small had started today, and sometimes small changes became powerful ones. The older woman walked slowly down the sidewalk after leaving the dealership, feeling the cool wind on her face. The day felt brighter than the ones before, almost as if the sky itself understood that something important had happened. She took her time, letting her mind settle. She had spoken her truth, and she had done it with calm strength. For her, that was enough. But her story was not finished yet. She made her way to a small park a few minutes from the dealership. It was a place she liked, quiet, filled with green trees and benches where people could sit and think. She chose a bench under an old tree whose branches stretched wide like open arms. She sat down carefully, placing her purse beside her. Birds hopped across the grass, picking at little seeds. Families walked by, children laughing. The world moved gently around her, and she breathed in slowly. Feeling peace return, she thought about the years behind her, the struggles. The long nights, the work she had done, the people she had helped. She remembered how many times strangers had misjudged her, seeing only her age or her skin. She remembered how many times she had stayed quiet, letting insults slide off her shoulders because she believed it was better to stay calm than to argue. But this time had been different. She had gone back to speak up, not for revenge, but for change. And change had begun. Still, something in her heart told her there was more she needed to do. After a few minutes, she stood again and began walking toward the bus stop. She held the railing as she stepped inside and took the same seat she had taken earlier. The bus was busier now. People talked in low voices. A young woman with headphones tapped her foot to music. A man in a work uniform leaned back with tired eyes. The older woman looked at all of them quietly, wondering how many stories each one carried as the bus moved. She thought about the dealership manager's face, how shocked he had been when he read her documents. She remembered the way the young man's voice trembled when he apologized. She hoped they truly understood what she had said. She hoped they would treat others more kindly. The morning air was cool when the elderly woman stepped off the bus and stood quietly at the edge of the busy street. Her small handbag rested safely in the bend of her elbow, and she took a moment to look around with calm eyes before making her way toward the large building across the parking lot. She walked slowly but confidently, moving with the care of someone who had learned to take life one step at a time. Her face carried gentle lines that came with age, and her gray hair was tied neatly at the back of her head. Everything about her was peaceful. She had been thinking about this visit for days. She needed a new car, something reliable that would make her errands easier. Public transport had served her well for many years, but now it was becoming tiring to wait long hours or climb crowded steps. She had saved carefully and planned even more carefully. This car was not a luxury for her. It was something she truly needed. When she reached the dealership gate, she paused to look at the large sign. She whispered to herself, just a tiny encouragement to keep moving. The parking lot was filled with shiny new cars, each one reflecting the bright sunlight. She admired them from a distance, feeling a quiet excitement in her chest. She did not buy things often. She believed in living simply, but she also believed in comfort when it was necessary. Today she felt ready. Inside the dealership, things were louder. Laughter, music, the sound of someone showing off an engine, phones ringing, shoes clicking on the polished floor. It felt busy, almost rushed, but she took it in slowly. She stepped inside with a polite smile, hoping someone would give her a moment of their time. A pair of young staff members stood near the entrance, talking to each other. They noticed her, but instead of offering to help, they exchanged a small smirk. One of them looked at her from head to toe, then leaned closer to the other. They whispered something she could not hear, but the way they laughed afterward made their intentions clear. She heard enough to know they were talking about her. The elderly woman did not let it show. She simply walked forward and approached the front desk, where a receptionist was typing something on a computer. The receptionist barely looked up. "Excuse me, dear," the woman said softly. "I'm hoping to ask about a car." The receptionist finally glanced at her, and although she smiled, it was the kind of smile that held no real warmth, the type of smile given out of obligation, not kindness. "All the salespeople are busy right now," she replied quickly. "Can you take a seat over there for a moment? Someone will get to you." But she did not point to an actual chair. She simply waved her hand in the general direction of the waiting area. The elderly woman nodded politely. "Of course, I can wait." She walked toward the chairs, choosing one near the large window so she could look outside. She set her handbag on her lap and folded her hands over it. She did not frown or complain. She simply waited, trusting that someone would help her soon. The sunlight streaming through the glass felt warm on her skin, and she let herself enjoy the moment. Across the room, the two young staff members continued whispering to each other. Every now and then, one of them looked at her, shook their head, and laughed quietly. They spoke as if she could not possibly understand what they were saying or what they meant. Their voices were not loud, but the slight mocking tone carried across the room. She heard one of them say, "Why do people come in here if they know they can't afford anything?" They spoke casually, not caring if she could hear or not. Another voice joined in softly. "Maybe she's waiting for someone else, or she's just looking around." The first staff member chuckled. "Or she's in the wrong place altogether." Their words were shaped by their assumptions. Their quick judgment based solely on her simple clothing, her quiet presence, and her age. They did not know her story. They did not know her plans. They did not know the patience, strength, and dignity that shaped her life. The elderly woman heard every word, but she kept her gaze steady on the cars outside. Her fingers lightly tapped the side of her handbag as she thought about the kindness she had always tried to offer others. She believed that everyone deserved respect. She also believed that people showed their true character when they thought no one was paying attention. After a few minutes, she raised her hand slightly to catch the attention of a passing staff member. "Dear, may I speak to someone now?" she asked gently. The staff member didn't slow down. "Someone will be with you soon," he said before continuing past her. His tone was rushed, almost dismissive. She lowered her hand and nodded to herself. She had lived long enough to understand these moments. Sometimes people judged without thinking. Sometimes they spoke without realizing the weight of their words. Sometimes they forgot that age did not mean weakness or poverty or lack of purpose. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. Time moved slowly in the waiting area. Every now and then, a salesperson walked by helping another customer, offering wide smiles and warm greetings. They seemed to have endless patience for people wearing expensive watches or fashionable shoes. But when their eyes passed over the elderly woman, they quickly moved on. One of the young staff members walked near the waiting area and pretended not to see her. He turned his head slightly, whispering again to his coworker. "You see? Still sitting here? Probably thinks she'll get someone to show her the newest model." Coworker laughed under their breath. The elderly woman adjusted her posture and took a slow breath. She did not want a confrontation. She did not want to cause trouble. She only wanted a fair chance to ask about a car. She had worked hard her whole life. She had saved carefully. She deserved at least a conversation. After almost 20 minutes, she stood up and approached the front desk again. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said calmly, "but I have been waiting for some time now. Is it possible to speak to a salesperson soon?" The receptionist tapped her keyboard lazily and said, "Ma'am, everyone is still busy." "You'll have to wait a little longer." The woman nodded again. "All right, dear. Thank you." She walked back to her chair slowly. She was patient, but patience had its limits. She could feel the sting of their assumptions, but she did not let the emotion overcome her. She had learned long ago that reacting with anger rarely brought real solutions. She sat for a moment longer, before deciding something quietly. She reached into her handbag and touched her phone, tapping the screen lightly. She did not call anyone yet. She simply held the phone in her hand as she thought. During this time, more customers came in and were greeted instantly. They were shown cars, offered water, given brochures. The dealership staff seemed eager for them. The elderly woman watched each interaction, noticing how different their energy was. She wondered if any of them realized how obvious it looked from her seat at one point. A woman her own age entered the dealership wearing bright jewelry and carrying a large purse. Two staff members hurried toward her immediately. They asked if she needed help and offered to show her the latest deals. The elderly woman watched the scene with a small sigh. She could see the difference. Finally, after nearly an hour of waiting, she stood up once more. Her movements were steady, calm, and full of quiet dignity. She walked toward the door without saying a word to the staff. For a moment, one of the young staff members called out behind her, "Ma'am, someone can help you soon if you still want to wait." His tone was half-hearted, as if he only spoke because he noticed she was leaving. She turned her head slightly and gave a gentle smile. "It's all right, dear. I've waited long enough." She walked out of the dealership without raising her voice, without expressing any anger, and without looking back. Her steps were steady as she made her way across the parking lot again. The sun was still bright. The breeze passed gently through her gray hair. She knew exactly what she was going to do next. She would return, not with frustration in her heart, but with clarity in her mind. And when she did, the people who had dismissed her today would see her in a way they never expected. She continued walking toward the bus stop, her calm expression unchanged. But deep inside, a quiet strength began to rise. The kind of strength that came from a lifetime of patience, the kind of strength that reminded her that dignity did not need to shout, the kind of strength that would speak for itself when she came back. The next morning arrived quietly, with soft light touching the walls of the elderly woman's living room. She woke early, the way she always did, moving gently through her home, as if every object held a memory. She made herself a warm cup of tea and sat near the window, letting the steam rise toward her face. Her mind wandered back to the events of the previous day. She had not expected the dealership staff to judge her so quickly. She had not expected their whispers or their dismissive behavior. She had hoped that her patience would be enough to earn their attention. But instead, she was treated as if she didn't matter, as if she was invisible, as if her presence was an inconvenience. She held the warm cup in both hands and took a long breath. Despite how she had been treated, she refused to let bitterness take root in her heart. She believed that dignity was something a person carried inside, not something others gave or took away. Still, a decision had been made in her mind. She could not allow such behavior to pass without addressing it. She had spent her life teaching younger people that respect was a choice, not a reaction. Yet yesterday, the staff had chosen poorly. After finishing her tea, she set the cup down and reached for her phone. There was a number she had been meaning to call someone she trusted, someone she had known for many years. She scrolled through her contacts slowly, her eyes softening when she found the name. She pressed the screen gently and held the phone to her ear. "Good morning," a friendly voice answered.
"Good morning, dear,"
she replied warmly. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. Hearing from you is always a pleasure. Is everything all right?" There was a pause as she thought about how to explain her experience without letting the disappointment show too strongly. "I went to a car dealership yesterday," she began calmly. "I planned to ask about a specific car, but the staff there did not treat me with kindness. They didn't offer help. They whispered about me. They assumed I shouldn't be there." The voice on the other end grew quiet, listening intently. "I waited nearly an hour," she continued softly, "and no one spoke to me with respect. So I left. But I wanted you to know, dear, because I believe people learn only when their behavior is brought to light." The voice responded with concern and seriousness. "Thank you for telling me. This is not acceptable. Give me a moment, Ty. We'll call you back shortly." "Take your time," she replied gently. When the call ended, she placed her phone on the table and looked at it as if it were a messenger carrying a quiet promise. She knew she had reached out to the right person. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to create a scene. She simply needed to speak with someone who understood responsibility. She stood up, walked to her closet, and chose her clothes for the day. This time, she would return to the dealership with a sense of calm confidence. She would not go alone. She felt certain of that. After she finished getting ready, her phone buzzed. She picked it up and answered. "I heard what happened," the voice said firmly. "I'll meet you at the dealership today. We'll handle this together." "Thank you," she replied. Her voice held both gratitude and quiet strength. By the time she stepped outside, the sun had risen higher, warming the pavement beneath her feet. She walked toward the bus stop again, but this time her steps felt lighter. The disappointment from the previous day lingered, but it no longer weighed her down. She knew something good could come from even the worst experiences. When she reached the dealership, she took a moment to stand outside and look at the building. Cars gleamed in the sunlight, positioned carefully in rows designed to impress visitors. She noticed how clean the windows were, how bright the entrance looked. It appeared welcoming from the outside, but she knew looks could be deceiving. Before she could step forward, a black car pulled into the lot. The door opened, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He walked toward her with a warm, familiar smile. "Good to see you," he said gently. "You dear," she replied. They walked side by side toward the entrance. She carried her calm presence. He carried an air of authority. It's the kind that did not need to be announced. Inside the dealership, the same two young staff members stood near the front. Their casual laughter filled the air until they noticed who had just walked in. Their expressions changed immediately. They straightened up, their eyes widening slightly. Their attention was fixed, not on the elderly woman, but on the man beside her. They assumed he was the one coming to buy a car. They assumed she was simply accompanying him. "Good morning, sir," one of them said quickly, stepping forward with a sudden burst of politeness. "How can we help you today?" The man's expression remained calm, but he did not respond right away. Instead, he looked toward the elderly woman. Giving her space to speak first, the staff member noticed this and blinked in confusion. Actually, she said gently, I'm the one who's here to ask about a car. There was a brief, awkward silence. The young staff members exchanged a quick glance. Their smiles weakened just a little, but they tried to hold on to their polite act. Of course, ma'am, the first staff member said. We'd be happy to show you something. Affordable. His choice of words slipped out before he could stop himself. She heard it. The man beside her heard it. The other customers in the lobby didn't notice a thing. I'm interested in the same car I asked about yesterday, she replied steadily. The one I waited over an hour to learn about. The staff member's smile faded completely now. He shifted uncomfortably. Oh, you were here yesterday? He muttered. Yes, she said plainly. I was here, and I was ignored. I was also spoken about in ways that were unnecessary. But I'm here again today because I believe people deserve a chance to do better. Duh. The room grew silent. Even the receptionist looked up from the front desk. The well-dressed man stepped forward slightly, his posture calm but firm. I'd like to speak with your manager, he said. The two staff members stiffened instantly. Yes, of course, sir, one replied. He hurried away, almost tripping over his own feet, as the elderly woman stood there. She looked around the dealership once more. Everything looked the same as the day before. The shiny floors, the bright lights, the polished cars. But this time, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel unheard. She felt grounded. The manager appeared a minute later, walking quickly with a practiced smile. Good morning, he said, directing his greeting toward the well-dressed man. How can we assist you today? But the man glanced at the elderly woman again. You may address her, he said kindly. The manager blinked. Of course. How can we help you, ma'am? She spoke calmly, without anger or impatience. I came here yesterday to ask about a car, but I was not treated with respect. I waited for a long time, and I left without anyone offering real help. I was spoken about as if I could not hear. I was judged before I even spoke. The manager's smile faltered. He looked toward the young staff members who avoided eye contact. I understand, the manager said slowly. I'm very sorry to hear that. We must have been busy, but the well-dressed man cut in gently but firmly. Being busy is no excuse for disrespect. The manager's eyes widened as he recognized the tone. It wasn't just a customer speaking. It was someone who understood leadership. Someone who demanded accountability. A person walks into your dealership, the man continued. You treat them with respect and dignity. No assumptions. No judgments. Every customer should feel welcome. The elderly woman stood quietly as he spoke. She appreciated his support. But she also believed in letting people learn through stillness. The manager's voice wavered slightly. I agree completely, and I apologize for what happened. We'll make sure, the well-dressed man interrupted gently. Good, because I am the regional director of this dealership chain. He said it calmly, without raising his voice or bragging. And this situation will be reviewed very carefully. Every sound in the dealership seemed to vanish. The young staff members froze. The receptionist stopped typing. Even customers turned their heads. The elderly woman looked down for a moment, almost shy about the attention. She had not asked for any of this. She had only wanted fairness. The manager swallowed hard and nodded quickly. Of course, sir. We understand. Please allow us to correct the situation immediately. The well-dressed man stepped back, letting the focus return to her. What would you like to do next? The manager asked her carefully. She smiled gently. I would like to see the car I came for. I still need transportation after all. Her tone was warm but steady, showing she held no grudge, only expectations. Absolutely, the manager said eagerly. I will personally show you. She nodded, but inside, she felt something deeper. A quiet strength, a sense of being seen again. This time, she would not be ignored. And the staff, who judged her the day before, finally began to understand just how wrong they had been. The sun was high in the sky as the elderly woman followed the manager across the showroom floor. A quiet confidence carried her steps. She was not in a hurry. She did not need to prove anything. Her calm presence filled the room in a way that made even the busiest workers slow down for a moment. The well-dressed man, regional director, stayed close beside her. He did not overshadow her. He did not try to control the situation. He simply stayed present, offering his support through his steady, respectful silence. The manager walked slightly ahead of them, his movements quick and nervous. He kept glancing back to make sure they were following. The young staff members who had dismissed her the day before stood quietly near a desk, watching the scene with unease. Their earlier arrogance had melted away, replaced by worry and an uncomfortable awareness of their behavior. The manager cleared his throat as he gestured toward a row of cars. "This way, ma'am. We've got several models that meet the features you asked about. I'll show you the main one you mentioned yesterday and then a few others if you like." She nodded politely. "Thank you, dear. That sounds fine." He led them toward a shiny light-colored sedan sitting under a row of bright ceiling lights. The car looked clean, polished, and inviting. The elderly woman stepped closer and ran her fingertips lightly along the smooth curve of the hood. "This one?" she asked softly. "Yes," the manager replied, eager to please. "It's reliable, comfortable, and has excellent safety ratings. A lot of our customers really enjoy this model." She circled the car slowly, her shoes making soft sounds against the polished floor. She observed every corner, every detail. She didn't pretend to be an expert, but she knew enough. She examined the doors, the mirrors, the tires. She wasn't looking for flaws. She was taking her time, letting herself imagine what it would feel like to drive it. "Would you like to sit inside?" the manager asked. "Yes, I would," she said. He opened the driver's door for her. She smiled gently and eased herself into the seat. She felt the cushion adjust under her weight. She touched the steering wheel, the dashboard, the control buttons. Everything felt new, clean, and different from what she was used to. "Comfortable?" the director asked kindly. "Very," she replied, nodding slowly. The manager stood nearby, waiting for her reaction. "If you want, ma'am, we can arrange a test drive right away." She shook her head softly. "No need, dear. I know this will work for me." The manager blinked, a little surprised. "You're certain?" "Yes," she said simply, but she didn't step out of the car immediately. She sat there for another moment, quietly appreciating the feeling. There was no rush. This was a decision she had waited a long time to make. When she finally stepped out, she closed the door carefully and stood straight. "Let's talk about the details, then." Her voice carried steady confidence. "Of course," the manager said quickly. "We can sit at the desk right over here and discuss everything." He led them to a clean, tidy desk near the middle of the room. Papers, brochures, and pamphlets were neatly arranged. He gestured for her to sit, then took the seat across from her. The regional director sat to her right, quietly observing. The dealership grew unusually quiet as other staff members noticed what was happening. Some of them pretended to work while listening closely. Others watched from afar, realizing just how important this moment was. The manager cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. "Now, ma'am, if you don't mind, I'll need to collect a bit of information from you, purely routine things, so we can prepare the paperwork." "Go ahead," she said. He handed her a form. "You can fill this out here, or I can help you if you'd like." She took the form gently and began filling it out without assistance. Her handwriting was steady and elegant, shaped by years of writing letters, notes, and lessons. The manager glanced at the first few lines she completed, and his eyes widened slightly. "Oh, excellent," he said, trying not to show his surprise. She continued filling in the information: her address, her phone number, her identification, and finally, her financial details, proof of income, credit score, and account information. When the manager reviewed the completed form, his face changed. His eyebrows lifted. His posture straightened. His nervousness intensified. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but everything here looks excellent. Truly excellent. Your credit score is outstanding. And your financial record is remarkable." She smiled softly. "Thank you, dear. I've always believed in being responsible. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes held wisdom. The regional director nodded in quiet approval. The manager swallowed hard. Realizing how wrong the staff's assumptions had been the day before, he said, clearing his throat again, "We can move forward very easily. This will be a smooth process." "Good," the director replied firmly. "It should be, always." His words were simple, but their weight was undeniable. While the manager prepared the next set of documents, the elderly woman looked around the dealership again. The young staff members who mocked her stood awkwardly near the reception desk, unsure whether to approach or stay back. She did not stare at them. She did not embarrass them. She simply watched the activity around her with quiet thoughtfulness. The manager printed a few papers and began explaining the details. "So, ma'am, this is the price of the car as displayed. However, since you were treated poorly yesterday, we'd like to extend a courtesy discount. It's the least we can do." She looked at him calmly. "That's kind of you, dear. But fairness is more important to me than discounts. I only want to be treated with respect." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course. Absolutely. And we will make sure of that." They continued reviewing the details: warranty options, service plans, and scheduled maintenance. She listened carefully to everything, asked thoughtful questions, and made her decisions with clarity. The regional director sat quietly, observing the professionalism that had suddenly emerged in the room. After some time, the manager stood up. "Let me go print the final documents. I'll be right back." While he stepped away, the elderly woman turned slightly toward the director. "You didn't have to come all the way here, dear, but I'm grateful you did." He smiled warmly. "You've given so much of your life helping others. The least I can do is stand with you. And besides, things like this need to be addressed. If no one speaks up, they continue." His voice was soft but strong. She nodded thoughtfully. "That's true." After a moment of silence, she added, "People forget how much someone has lived when they look only at appearance. They don't see the years, the hard work, the lessons, the sacrifices. They see only what they want to see." "But you handled it with grace," he said. She smiled lightly. "Anger only closes ears, dear. Kindness opens them." He nodded. "You always say things worth remembering." Before she could respond, the manager returned with a stack of papers. His hands were steady, but his face still carried a hint of nervousness. "Everything is ready, ma'am," he said politely. "We just need your signatures on these pages." She took her time reading each document before signing. She did not rush. She believed in understanding what she committed to. The dealership remained quiet as she moved through each page. When she finished signing, the manager gently collected the papers and placed them neatly in a folder. "Thank you very much," he said sincerely. "We're honored to have you as a customer." She nodded. "Thank you for helping me today." But before she stood up, she looked toward the two young staff members who had mocked her earlier. They stiffened when they saw her gaze shift toward them. The regional director noticed this too and turned slightly. "May I speak with them?" she asked softly. The director nodded. "Of course, if you wish." The manager gestured uncertainly. Yes, ma'am. I'll bring them over." He approached the young staff members and whispered something quietly. Their faces turned pale as they walked toward her slowly. When they reached her, the elderly woman did not glare at them. She did not speak sharply. Instead, she looked at them with gentle eyes. "Yesterday," she began softly, "I heard the things you said about me. I saw how you looked at me. I felt the way you dismissed me." They stood silently, guilt written across their faces. "I want you to remember something," she continued. "You never know who someone really is. You don't know their story, their struggles, or their accomplishments. You don't know how much strength they carry inside." She paused for a moment. "But everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves patience. Everyone deserves respect. Not because of what they can buy, but because they're human." One of the young staff members swallowed hard. "We're truly sorry, ma'am. We were wrong." The other nodded quickly. "Very wrong. We shouldn't have treated you that way." She offered a gentle smile. "Thank you for saying that. I believe in second chances. I always have." Just remember to treat the next person better than you treated me." They nodded again, their expressions full of gratitude and relief. She turned back to the manager, who stood watching the interaction with deep embarrassment. "Thank you for listening," she said softly. The regional director stood up as she did. His voice was calm but clear. "We will be reviewing staff training immediately. Respect will not be optional in this dealership." The manager nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, absolutely." The elderly woman held her handbag gently and took one slow breath. "So," she said with a peaceful smile, "when can I pick up the car?" The manager replied instantly, "We can have it ready by this afternoon, ma'am. Everything will be prepared." She nodded. "That's perfect." As she turned toward the door with the director at her side, the people in the dealership watched her quietly. Her steps were steady and light. She didn't rush. She didn't boast. She simply walked with the quiet strength that had guided her throughout her life. Outside, the sunlight felt warm on her face again. She paused at the entrance and took a deep breath. "Are you Ulrich?" The morning sun fell gently over the city as the older woman stepped out of her quiet home, holding her small purse close to her side. The air felt calm, but her heart was full of many emotions. She had not slept well the night before. Too many thoughts had stayed with her, especially the way the staff at the car dealership had treated her. She did not want to hold on to anger, but she could still feel the sting of the way they had looked at her, spoken to her, and dismissed her as if she did not matter. She kept telling herself that she should not allow their behavior to decide her worth. She had lived a long life, full of challenges and lessons. She had faced things much harder than rude people. Still, she knew she had to go back today, and she knew the truth she carried with her would change everything. She walked slowly toward the transport stop near her home. She liked walking in the early morning. The roads were still quiet, and the world seemed softer. Birds sat on wires, calling out to one another. A soft wind pushed against the trees. Everything felt peaceful, as if the universe itself was telling her to stay calm. When the bus reached her neighborhood, she stepped off and walked toward her home. Her steps were slow but steady. Her house stood at the end of a small lane, painted in soft colors that made it feel warm. She opened the door and stepped inside, greeted by the quiet she always found comforting. She placed her purse on the table and made herself a warm cup of tea. She sat on her favorite chair near the window, sipping slowly. Outside, the sun began to lower, painting the sky in orange and gold. She watched it as she drank, letting its warmth soften the last bit of heaviness in her heart. Later that evening, her phone buzzed on the table. She reached for it slowly, curious. The screen showed a number she did not recognize. She hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice spoke. It was the manager from the dealership. "Good evening, ma'am," he said with a respectful tone. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," she replied softly. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," he said quickly, "but I wanted to call and thank you again. After you left, we held a longer meeting with the entire staff. We talked about what happened, and we talked about the way people should be treated. Many of them were deeply embarrassed when they learned who you were and what you have done in your life." She smiled gently, though he could not see it. "It is not about who I am, dear. It is about how all people should be spoken to." "I understand," he said. "And I want you to know that we are making changes. New training, better rules, and stronger reminders about respect. Your visit opened our eyes in a way that I don't think we will forget." She nodded, even though he could not see her. "Thank you. That means a lot." The manager paused. "Also, there is something else. We would be honored if you would come back to the dealership. Not for business, unless you want to, but because we want to officially apologize and show you how things have changed." She was not sure she wanted a public moment like that, but she understood the value of what he was offering. "I will think about it," she said gently. "Of course." "Take your time," he replied. They ended the call. She placed the phone down and sat quietly for a long moment. She felt something warm in her chest. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. Or the feeling of knowing she had done the right thing. The next morning, she woke early, as she always did. She made breakfast, watered her plants, and took a slow walk outside. Everything felt calm. As she walked, she thought again about the manager's invitation. She was not someone who liked attention, but she also believed that showing up could help them grow, and maybe her presence could inspire someone else. She decided she would return. A few days later, she put on a neat outfit and headed once again to the dealership. This time, she felt no heaviness in her chest. She walked with steady steps, her mind clear. When she reached the dealership doors, she saw the manager waiting for her at the entrance. Several employees stood behind him, including the young man who had mocked her. Their expressions were different this time: humbled, respectful, sincere. The manager stepped forward and greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming, ma'am," she smiled. "Thank you for inviting me." They walked her inside, and the employees gathered in a small half circle. The young man stepped forward, holding a small folder. "Ma'am," he said softly, looking directly at her, "I want to apologize again. I was wrong in the way I treated you. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I'm truly sorry." His voice cracked slightly, showing he was not pretending. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Thank you for apologizing, dear. That takes strength." The manager then opened the folder and handed her a certificate. She looked at it with surprise. It was a recognition from the dealership thanking her for her contribution to improving their customer care and inspiring better treatment of everyone who walked through their doors. She looked up at them, touched. "This is very kind," she said softly. "It's the least we could do," the manager replied. After the small gathering, the manager gave her a tour of the dealership, showing her the new posters they had put up. Each one carried simple reminders. Every person deserves respect. Every customer has a story you cannot see. Speak with kindness. She smiled as she read them. These were the messages the world always needed more of. Before she left, the young man approached her again. "Ma'am, if it's all right, I want to ask something." "Of course," she replied. "Would it be okay if I walk you to the bus stop?" he asked. She gave him a warm smile. "Yes, dear. I would like that." They walked together, talking quietly. He told her about his life, how he was still learning, still growing, still trying to become better. She listened with gentle understanding. When they reached the bus stop, he looked at her with gratitude. "Thank you for not giving up on people like me." She touched his hand lightly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." He nodded. The bus arrived and she stepped on carefully. She turned back for a moment, giving him one last smile before taking her seat as the bus drove away. She felt a deep sense of peace. She had come back with the truth. She had spoken with kindness. She had shown them who she truly was, and in doing so, she had changed not just their behavior, but their hearts. She looked out the window at the passing streets and whispered softly to herself, "Respect is a small thing to give, but it can change the world." She knew, without a doubt, that her story had done exactly that.